So today's video topic we wanted to talk about that actually came about due to a question a client was asking us is just about programming and how to individualize a program for yourself. So what sort of variables needed to be taken into account, stuff like that. So today we thought we'd look at that. So obviously the first thing you're going to need to consider is your goals, both short and long term. You need to remember that your goals need to be laid out well in advance, and that short-term goals should build towards your long-term. Any training that you design, both your macro cycles, your micro and your meso cycles, all need to take into account these goals. So every aspect of your training program should be in some way working towards your goals. That one's a fairly obvious factor. From there, individualization needs to really be taken into account. So generic programs are often used, but really shouldn't be. Training needs to be about the individual, and we need to plan for the individual and the factors that they have specifically that may impact their training. So stuff that you need to take into account around this will be motivation levels. So basically this is going to impact how you adhere to a program and how likely you are to stick to it. If you think with your current motivation you're only going to be able to stick to 3 days training a week, don't plan a 6-day a week split, stuff like that. Relating to this is time constraints. These need to be taken into account for every person. Again, if you've got someone who's working an emergency room, they're working 12 to 16 hour shifts 5 days a week, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to program heavily on the days that they are working those long shifts. And you're going to need to take into account those time constraints into how much training you can put into their program. So these are probably the two most basic factors that need to be taken into account for people, not looking at physical aspects, more looking at time and mental aspects. From there, some more obvious physical aspects, maybe the sport, event or goals that the person's working towards. So obviously training needs to be completely different if the person is training to play AFL football than if they are playing tennis, or if they are planning on competing in a triathlon or a marathon or something like that. That needs to be taken into account. The time frame until the event. So pre-season of football is going to be a lot shorter time frame than a person who's trying to build up towards running a marathon in 18 months time. So the time frame of when the person would like to start competing in the sport or event also needs to be taken into account. And a bit further to this, just the person's current physical conditioning and any illness, injuries or conditions that may impact their physical ability to train. So these all sound pretty obvious, but when people sit down to program or look at using generic programs, these are the things they're not taking into account. So understanding your physical capabilities currently, your time frame for reaching your goals, how much time and motivation you have, and what specifically your goals are will be major factors that need to be taken into account when programming. Getting into the more technical aspects, to understand and correctly program, you're also going to need to be able to understand the generic training principles. So stuff like sets, repetitions, rest breaks, splits over days, how many days a week you're training and stuff like that. So looking at intensity of training, you're looking at duration of training, you're looking at frequency of training, stuff like that. So understanding in relation to your goals how each one of those aspects applies. So if you're training, say, for an event that requires a lot of raw or maximal strength, training for endurance is not going to be beneficial for that. So these are the things that you're going to need to understand. What rep ranges will correspond with your event. If you're doing running, running 10 kilometers a day is not necessarily going to improve your running for Aussie rules football or tennis. So there's a lot of variables that need to be taken into account, and obviously it can sound quite overwhelming, but if you can understand these basics and then understand the basics of training principles, so understanding your needs, your goals, and your limitations specifically in relation to you, and then understanding generic training principles, you will begin to be able to see how you can apply those generic training principles to a more specific nature to your training. Obviously, reaching out to qualified professionals, asking questions online and stuff like that. We often host Q&As. that can help out with stuff like this, and we're happy to answer questions about people's training programs and assist with programming and stuff like that, just as part of our business without charging. It's something we like helping people with, and it's something that gives us a bit of a challenge, so it's something that we enjoy doing. Thanks for watching today. Just make sure you like and subscribe to our channel, and share our videos so we get a bit more reach. We're always looking at building our channel.